If you've never created a 3D model in Blender before, that's changed now. See this building? Let's build it! That said, hello and welcome to Red House 3. My name is Ramon, and today I will show you step by step how I create this building. But before that, if you don't know anything about Blender, I recommend checking out my beginning guide in the card right above. Also keep in mind that every key I press will be displayed here in the bottom right corner. Since I usually use both numeric keypads, whenever I refer the numpad, I will make sure to let you know. About the project, we are going to use a technique very similar to the one used in 2D game development, called a tile set. In 3D, this is known as a modular asset, which means using pre-made pieces to speed up scenes assembling. In your case, we'll create our own pieces to build the structure. Here's the plan. We'll create 5 separate walls and 2 distinct floors. Keep in mind that every building has 3 main floors that stand out in its structure: the ground floor, the top floor, and everything in between. Usually, buildings, especially taller ones, have identical layout or only slight variation between floors. Lucky for us, we don't need to create all 8 walls from scratch. In fact, we only need 5, and out of those, only 2 will actually be fully detailed. Confused? Don't worry. Stick with me and it will all make sense by the end. Alright, let's start with the first wall. Select everything you're seeing by pressing A, then delete it with X. Now press Shift A to open the Add menu and create a cube. Yes, I follow the most important Blender rule: never use the default cube. Press 1 on your numpad to switch to the front view, facing the Y-axis. Now enter edit mode by pressing Tab, then press 3 on the top row of your keyboard to switch to face selection. Select and delete 5 out of the 6 faces of the cube, leaving only the one facing the Y-axis. You'll notice that the object's origin point isn't created relative to the new shape. That's because it was created for a cube, meaning the distance from the origin point to any face is the same. This will actually help us when assembling the building floors, since they all also follow a cubic structure. So be careful, not move this new plan while creating the wall. The first of 2 walls we will build from scratch will have 2 windows, so press 1 on the numpad again and use Ctrl-R to create 3 loop cuts, 1 horizontal and 2 vertical. Select the left vertical cut to the horizontal one, then bevel them using Ctrl-B. This will define the space where the window will be. If needed, move the edges using G and X for horizontal adjustment and G and Z for vertical ones to get the right proportions. Select the 2 top vertices of the window, right-click and subdivide them once. Then move the new vertex slightly upward using G and Z. Now use Ctrl-Shift-B to bevel only that vertex. In the panel on the bottom left, set the width to 0.3 and the segment to 4, creating an arch. Switch to face selection by pressing 3, select the window area and press I to insert faces, setting the thickness to around 0.12. Go back to vertex selection with 1, then use the knife tool K and cut the 2 inner bottom vertices of the window. Dissolve the 2 edges below using X. Now using Ctrl-R to create 2 new cuts, one between the center edge and the window, and another between the window and the edge of the wall. Dissolve those inner edges with X, then select the face and press E to extrude it by 0.15. Dissolve any extra edges from this extrusion, select the face again, and press I to inset it by 0.025. With the top face of the extrusion selected, press E again and move it slightly downward. Finally, select the entire base of the extrusion and move it down as well. For the window details, first use Ctrl-R and add cuts on the both sides. Because of the extrusion, the loop cut didn't create a single continuous loops and ended up slightly misaligned, but that actually helps us here. Select the 2 new cuts, press S, then Z, then 0. This scales the vertices along the Z-axis to 0, aligning them perfectly from the center. Now bevel them using Ctrl-B with a value around 0.37. and increase the number of segments to 5. Next, Cut the window in half again with Ctrl R, but this time click on the two inner vertices and press J to connect them with an edge. Along that same central line, dissolve the outer vertices using X. Select the two center faces of the window and using Set Faces with I, setting it to 0.025. Now that we have an inner frame, select it along with the center faces and press E to extrude by 0.025 negative. Going back to the center cut, clean it up again by dissolving the outer edges, then use Ctrl B to add another bevel, this time around 0.015. Just select the top and bottom faces and extrude once more to create a glass. I will use 0.050 negative this time. Now let's move on to the outer frame. Select every other face along the arch and extrude them by 0.02. Repeat the same process for the remaining faces, but this time use a value of 0.025. Select all front faces of the arch and bevel them with a value of 0.01 and 2 segments. At the bottom of our plane, use Ctrl R to add a horizontal cut, then move it up 0.70 using G and Z. Now add a vertical cut right below the window and clean up the edges we want to use. Select the new edge and bevel it with a value of 0.03, setting the segments to 1. Above the window, use Ctrl R to create a cut, then press J on the inner vertices to connect them. Add another cut above that using Ctrl R again. Now select this entire top strip and extrude it using E twice. First 0.03, then another 0.03 only on the upper strip. Go back to Object Mode, then press Alt 8 to review any hiding objects. Let's delete the old backup and press Shift D to duplicate our window. Hide the copy, select the window, enter Edit Mode with Tab, and delete everything on the right side of the center line. Now just add a mirror modifier. As you can see, the object is now mirrored, but we need to prevent the two sides from separating. To do that, simply enable clipping. Also turn on the small triangle icon in the modifier so you can see the mirrored vertices. Go to the bottom part of the wall and select the two end faces. Press E to extrude them by 0.1. Repeat the process with the remaining face, but this time extrude it by 0.12. Select the three front faces without selecting the center cut and bevel them using Ctrl B with a value of 0.02. Increase the segment to 2. Like I mentioned before, this is one of the two walls we are actually building from scratch. Now let's move on to the its variations. Go back to Object Mode with Tab, duplicate our window using Shift D and hide one of them. Click the arrow on the modifier and apply it. Now delete all the faces that make up the small flower beds in front of the window. Select all the vertices of that empty rectangle and press F to create a new face. Using the knife tool, K, make a vertical cut following the outer squares. Use Ctrl R to add a cut in the middle of the rectangle and clear up any unnecessary edges. Now press Ctrl B and set the bevel to 0.2 with 3 segments. Cut the rectangle from one side to the other horizontally. Adjust if necessary. Once again, select every other face and extrude them using E, setting it to 0.02. Repeat the process on the remaining faces, but this time use 0.025. Select the front faces, bevel them with Ctrl B at 0.01 and increase the segments to 2. For the third variation, just duplicate the window we just edited, go into Edit Mode with Tab, delete the entire left side, add a mirror modifier, enable clipping, and apply it. For the fourth variation, duplicate the window with the flower pot, right-click and choose Mirror X Global. You might be starting to notice that our building is taking shape, and so far we've made 5 walls, but only really put heavy work into one. Let's go to the wall with a single window so we can get started. Back in Edit Mode, use Ctrl R to add a horizontal cut to the bottom part of the plane, then bevel it by 0.11. Increase the segments to 2. Next, select the new edges of the left side and dissolve them. Select the left 4 faces on the right and extrude them by 0.15. Deselect the top one and repeat the process until you form a staircase. To the left of the stairs, we are at the same frame used on the other windows. So select those 2 faces, press E to extrude them by 0.1, repeat the process on the middle face, this time using 0.12, and then With all three faces selected, bevel them using Ctrl B with a value of 0.02 and 2 segments. Now dissolve the edges above the stairs and the ones connecting the door to the center cut. Select the face and press I to inset it by 0.70. Press K and use the knife tool to fix the edges, then dissolve the 3 extra edges. Add a horizontal cut with Ctrl R, press S, then Z, then 0 to align it, and then bevel it with Ctrl B at 0.45. Increase the segment to 3. Dissolve the edges in the center area, add a vertical cut with Ctrl R, deselect only the frame edge, and dissolve the rest. Now move it up by 0.15 using G and Z, then bevel it again with Ctrl B at 0.25, using 4 segments. Deselect the bottom vertices and scale them using S to 1.35. Just like we did with the window, select every other face and extrude them by 0.02, then repeat the process on the remaining faces, this time using 0.025. Finally, select all the faces of the frame and bevel them by 0.02. Now select the center face and extrude it by 0.15 negative, then inset it by 0.05. Use the knife tool again to refine the door shape and dissolve any unnecessary edges. Once more, use the knife tool to cut the door horizontally, this time just below the corner around the middle of this section. Select the new area and inset it by 0.25. Select their vertices and press M to merge them at the center. Repeat the process on the other side. On the door face, use Ctrl R to add vertical cuts both at the top and the bottom, connect the vertices using J, and then bevel them by 0.025. Select the 2 horizontal vertices in the middle of the door, connect them with J, and bevel them by 0.015 using B. Now select these 4 inner faces and using set faces with I, setting it to 0.02. Use the knife tool again and dissolve a few edges to clean up this small section near the center horizontal cut. Now using extrusion, we'll build the proper layer to give depth to the door. Select the entire door except the first arch and extrude it by 0.015 negative. Then at the top of the door, select the arch face along with the 4 inner frames and extrude them by 0.015 negative. Finally, on the 4 highlighted faces of the door, apply a bevel using Ctrl B with a value of 0.01. Alright, now that we have all the parts of our tile set, let's assemble it. In Object Mode, press Alt 8 to reveal all our pieces. Now, except for the door, select one at a time and rotate them. The first one 90 degrees, the second 90 degrees negative, and the third 180. For the fourth wall, move it up by 2 units using G and Z. As you can see, we already have a very simple building to assemble and we could finish it right now. But if we do that, we'd have to color each individual piece, so let's leave that part for later. First, we'll create the shader for our structure. I've already tested a few colors variations beforehand, so instead of watching me search for colors, you will see the hex codes I used. That way, you can use the exact same colors if you want. For our first shader, we'll need 1 mix, 2 bump nodes, 3 color ramps, 1 Voronoi texture, 2 noise textures, 1 mapping, and 1 texture coordinate. Start by setting the roughness to 0.8, then connect the mix node to the base color and increase the factor to 0.85. Connect a color ramp to input A, plug the Voronoi texture into the color ramp, then connect the mapping to the Voronoi and the texture coordinate to the mapping. Lower the white handle of color ramp to 0.003. Change the Voronoi to distance to edge and set the scale to 20. Now connect another color ramp to the mix, set your colors and adjust the handles. Plug a noise texture into this color ramp, connect the mapping to the noise and set the details to 12. Now connect a bump node to the principled BSDF and set the strength to 0.25. Connect the Voronoi color ramp to the height of this bump. On the bump node, always set distance and filter width to 1. On the second bump node, connect it to the normal and set its strength to 0.175. Connect the third color ramp to the height of the second bump and plug the second noise texture into that color ramp. Adjust the handles, then set the noise scale to 1, detail to 13, and roughness to 1. Finally, connect the mapping to this noise as well. And there you have it, our first shader. Let's move on to the second one. Add a new material slot and copy the shader we just created. Select the all that will use this shader and click Assign. Delete the mix node, then add a third bump node and a brick texture. Adjust the first color ramp, choose your color, then connect it to the base color and replace the Voronoi texture with the brick texture. In the brick texture, set mortar size to 0.005 and mortar smooth to 1. Connect the mapping to the brick texture and change the texture coordinate input to UV. Reset the second color ramp and adjust its handles. In the noise texture, set the scale to 20 and detail to 16. Now connect all three bump nodes together, plug the brick texture directly into the first one and increase its strength to 1. Connect the second color ramp to the second bump and set its strength to 0.25. Then connect the third color ramp to the third bump and set its strength to 0.5. And there you have it, our second shader. From here on, we'll just create a few variations, but before that, we need to fix our brick texture. Since we are using the UV output from the texture coordinate, we need to correct the UV map. So in the UV editing workspace, press A to select all the vertices of the object, then press U and choose Cube Projection. Don't forget to enable the Scale to Bounds option in the bottom panel. Repeat the process for the other objects. Add another shader, this time click New. Go back to the first shader, copy the chain from the last noise texture to its bump, and paste it into the new shader. Connect the bump, change the color, and assign it to the flower pot. Repeat the process for the soil in the pot, but set the roughness to 0.8, the bump strength to 1, enable invert, and set the detail to 9. Don't forget to change the color. You can also adjust the color ramp handles. The next shader is for the window frame, and again, we'll just change the color. Instead of using transparency for the glass, we'll add emission. So this shader needs a base color and emission color, and then we set the strength to 3. Now let's add 3 different tones for the door. One for the outer frame, one for the inner frame, and one for the background. For the inner frame, we can duplicate the flower pot shader and change the color. Oh, for aesthetic reasons, I will apply this first shader to the top awning as well. I think it looks better this way. Alright, all the colors are ready. Now we just need to apply them to the rest of the pieces. To do that, select everything by pressing A, making sure the object with the shader is the active one. Then press Ctrl L and click on Link Material. As you can see, all our pieces now share the same shaders. Now we just need to assign them to the correct parts. Since we've done this several times already in this video, I'm going to skip this part to save time and go straight to what matters. Here's our building. I want mine to have only these 2 floors, so I'll duplicate just these 3 bottom walls and move them up by 2 units. Then I'll select them and rotate them 90 degrees to add a bit more variation to the building. Now that everything's ready, all that's left is to set up the scene and render it. For that, let's go back to the Layouts tab, create a camera using Shift A, and then create a new collection to place it in and keep things organized. With your mouse over the viewport, press 0 on the numpad to enter camera view. Then go to the right panel, open the View tab, and enable Camera to View. Now whenever you move while in camera view, the camera will follow your movement. So let's position the camera the way we like. Once you find a good angle, disable camera to view so you can move freely without affecting it. Now let's create a plane to serve as the ground. and then add 2 area lights facing opposite directions. One of them should be stronger than the other to better balance the lighting in the scene. Set a color for your plan, then play around with the colors of your lights to find a tone that works best for you. This usually depends not only on the color of your main object, but also on your background. Keep in mind that lights reflect off every physical surface. In other words, your plane will bounce back part of the light that's hit it. Go to the Compositing tab. Let's open another workspace here on the left, switch it to Viewport, enable Rendered View, and turn off the overlay for a clear view. Let's also keep the compositing view always visible. In compositing, there are 2 basic nodes that can really change the look of your project: glare and brightness contrast. Let's add them, connect them, and tweak their values. We'll use the glare nodes in blue modes to create a different lighting effect, while the contrast will help us better control that effect. Don't afraid to experiment with different values. At first, I worked with the threshold and strength at 0.5 while setting the contrast to 5, but after a few tests, I adjusted the threshold to 0.7 and the strength to 0.4. Once you're happy with your compositing, you can go to the render engine here on the right panel and switch it to cycles. This isn't mandatory, but for this project, I believe it gives the best results. Just keep in mind that cycle is much heavier than Eevee, since it's tried to simulate lighting in a more realistic way. So, we've basically reached the end of the project, but before rendering, feel free to make any adjustment you think are necessary, whether in the model, the lighting, or the scene overall. This project is yours too, so it's only fair that you add your own touch to it. Oh, and you thought I forgot about the roof, right? Just select the 4 top walls, press Ctrl J to join them, select the top vertices, and press F. Finally, press F12 to render an image or Ctrl F12 to render an animation if you dedicate to it a bit further. I hope everything went well during our short listen, and this video not only helped you but also motivated you to learn more about 3D modeling in Blender. In the coming weeks, building on this project, I will be releasing videos about modular assets, how to create a procedural city in a very simple way, and even how to build a character-based mesh efficiently. So, if you don't want to miss any of that, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, share it with your friends, and I'll see you in the next time.